Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Dear Umair. Today is Friday, September 10th, 2021. The article we're reading is called The Age of Needless Catastrophe, written or published on September 5th. So here we go. And as you all know, when I read, I make my background red. Red equals reading. So that way you can just, if you've already read the article, you want to fast forward to discussion, just fast forward through to when it's no longer read. Okay. The age of needless catastrophe. We have the tools to solve the biggest problems of now. What we don't have is the power to use them. And by the way, I'm going to be jumping in with commentary as we read, and I encourage you all to do the same. Oftentimes we just read through the article and then start commenting, but you'll just see our free-flowing style here. I guess I'll have to just be agile with the virtual background when I do that. So somebody remind me, please, if I don't remember myself, to change the virtual background when we're commenting. Did you know that we could mitigate the worst effects of climate change by simply planting trees? It wouldn't take all the techno sci-fi scenarios of current day mythology, seawalls, humongous barriers, engineered atmospheres, artificial skies. Nope, just trees. All right, well, I'm going to call bullshit right there, and I'm going to change my background since I've got some comments to make on that. So here's my comment. We're at a point now, Umair and company, where we actually do need some form of solar radiation management, okay? Why do I say that? First of all, I'm a huge fan of planting trees. Let's plant all the trees we possibly can. And that's going to take more than us just, closing our eyes and praying for trees, right? We're going to have to roll up our sleeves and do some work. The first phase of that work that I imagine is the cultural transformation. Here's the thing, when I say first phase, a lot of people might get the impression that I'm saying, hey, whoa, don't go plant trees just yet. First, we got to transform culturally. And that's not what I mean. I mean, a whole bunch of these things need to happen in parallel, but a key gating factor is that humanity is now living a story. And Umair gets into this in the article where he says, look, living trees, planting trees, there's no money in planting trees. There's only money in chopping trees down. That's absolutely true. And that's one of the things at the heart of the problem, but it's not the only thing at the heart of the problem. I would say if you dig deeper into the roots of it, yes, capitalism is omnicidal. That's freaking blatantly obvious. But what's at the roots of capitalism? Beneath capitalism, as you do the archaeological dig through human history and the evolution or devolution, whatever the opposite of evolution is, to getting us to where we are now, is separation. People believing and perceiving that we're separate from each other. So first there's separation. Well, if we're going to be separate, then I need to be on top and I need to dominate. Either I need to enslave you, rape you, own you, bully you around, like in corporations, schools, whatever. And then capitalism is just kind of a more methodical, systematic, quantifiable way of doing exactly that, okay? And but the root of it, I believe, is separation, the illusion of separation, because we are one species. So what I'm saying is, for a few of us to just get out there and just try to plant trees, absent a more radical transformation in the human story, human culture, human civilization, is like kids at the beach trying to hold back the tide with their hands, right? It's not that they're not pushing water back into the ocean. They are. It's just that the force of the tide overwhelms their best efforts. And in our case, we have not only capitalism mowing down the trees, but we also have wildfires, exponential planetary overheating that's not even giving the baby saplings a chance because they're being overwhelmed by the fires, by the drought, soil erosion, etc. So where am I going with this? See, Umair writes, that we don't need engineered atmospheres, artificial skies. And I say that with some cynicism because the most effective form of solar radiation management is marine cloud brightening, spraying ocean water into the air, into the lower atmosphere from the surface of the ocean using wind and wave propelled vessels, wind generating the power to drive the pumps. And so there, yes, we are, messing with the atmosphere, but what are we doing? We're doing the same thing that nature herself does. We're just giving her a helping hand, right? We're adding more salt water in droplets into the atmosphere than she can do by herself, creating brighter clouds, more clouds and brighter clouds to reflect more sunlight back into space, right? Why is that so urgent right now? There's such a thing as a tipping point. There's such a thing as multiple tipping points. We've crossed through so many tipping points, right? We're like, a grade B- movie from the late 70s where some big American car is just plowing through barricade after barricade after barricade, right? Before it gets to the edge of some cliff and then goes, flying off. We're just about to fly off the edge of the cliff. So we need something more than just planting trees or even just decarbonizing or even the combination of the two. We need the big guns of solar radiation management. And part of that is marine cloud brightening. Now, people can put derogatory names to marine cloud brightening, calling them engineered atmospheres, artificial skies. And here's where we run the risk of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. There's a lot of really, really stupid ideas, spraying crap into the atmosphere that should never be there. But droplets of ocean water, what's the harm, right? What's the harm? It's the most benevolent form of solar radiation management. We urgently need to do this, not as a substitute for planting trees, not as a substitute for regenerative agriculture, not as a substitute for eliminating animal agriculture, right? Not as a substitute for decarbonization, not as a substitute for growing hemp and sequestering carbon and all those great things, right? But because we've reached such an emergency, the exponential is so steep right now. We're taking in so much heat, and we're melting the natural mirrors away. We need to replace those urgently. And, a lot of people want to live in a world where all we have to do is plant trees and grow community gardens and hold our hands and sing Kumbaya, and everything will be fine. Just like, the bedtime stories were read to us when we were kids. But boys and girls, and Umair, I love you, Umair, but you're missing something here, which is that we've reached a state of extreme rate of overheating that is growing. The rate of overheating is growing by the week. Okay, that's the nature of an exponential, right? Anyway, any comments on that? And also give me some feedback. Tell me, Jamin, that was really uncalled for, or Jamin, that was great, or Jamin, that was stupid. I mean, just feel free. I mean, it's time, as we say in Ireland, to cut the shit, quit the shit and cut the cake, right? If I said that right. So anyway, love some feedback, and then I'll keep reading. But after all of you've had a go at it, passing the talking.
Well, I mean, whatever about the way you put it across or whatever, I agree with what you're saying, because clearly Umair is missing something here, because like the Arctic has already passed a tipping point, and this is peer-reviewed literature. That's just after coming out. Actually, some of it's only just come out prior to the IPCC report being released in August. So I'm not even sure if it's in there, but I think it's been mentioned. But the Arctic has now gone past the tipping point. It's no longer a carbon sink. And so too has the Amazon. It's gone past the tipping point. It's now an emitter rather than a carbon sink as well. We've passed critical tipping points in major ecological. The whole balance of the earth is being changed as we speak. So you know what I mean. And the world is feeling it, but they're not feeling the full effects of what's to come yet. They're only starting to feel the pangs of what's to come. But people already know something's not fucking right, like. And we haven't got any time to be arguing about, yes, planting trees is vital, and yes, drawdown of carbon is vital, and yes, all other look, the whole world, there's no argument with Umair. I agree with the man 100%. The world is in the shit, like it's going down the shitter very fast, and we got a multitude of problems, and they're piling up on top of us. And the fact is that global warming is going to solve all those problems by basically wiping the whole lot of us out. And that's not the way to go. You know what I'm saying? We're going to be the species that became extinct because we couldn't get our shit together and work together. And that's what we need to do. There are solutions. Umair is right in the start of his article there. There are solutions and there are technologies out there. Yes, some of them may sound or have been made to sound controversial, like solar radiation management or all these. But the point is, they had been originally been made to sound as if we're interfering or messing with nature by the oil companies, and all that's after coming out as well. We know about Exxon and how they've contributed to falsifying information about climate and everything else. So the point I'm making is that the world is burning up. The globe has to be cooled down somehow, and solar radiation management is a vital part of that. And there are a number of different types, and marine cloud brightening is by far the least invasive and bigger bang for the buck, as you said, Jamin. So with all respect to Umair, I think he needs to do a little bit more research on the subject.
Yeah, exactly. Do more research, and it's also a matter of facing reality. I mean, look back at the dawn of World War II in Europe. Neville Chamberlain wanted to live in a world where England could be at peace, not have to go to war, just by talking nice to the Nazis. Let's talk nice with them. Let's show them that we trust them and that we can be trusted, and that, right? It took a Winston Churchill to say, no, screw that. It's, we're not gonna negotiate. No negotiation. You guys have to leave. And that's what we're saying. It's simply not enough at this point. We've crossed so many tipping points. It's time to break out the big guns of SRM so that we can cool the planet. Guess what? So that the little baby saplings that we plant can have a chance, right? You don't just take a newborn baby and throw them in the middle of Broadway, minutes after they're born and say, sink or swim, buddy. Let's see if you're tough enough to make it. No, they need to be in a crib with mother's milk and nice warm temperature and, fluffy, squishy toys and nice music and bedtime stories, right? We need to baby Mother Earth back to health right now. And the first thing we need to do is turn down the damn heat. And there's one way to do that right now, period. Only one, and that's solar radiation management. So that's a reality we have to face.
And according to the specialist and the top in their field, we're looking at the prospects of an ice-free Arctic within the next 2 years. It takes an average of 20 years to grow to a mature tree.
Yeah, exactly. We could have an ice-free Arctic this next summer. We could have an ice-free Arctic in months, not even 2 years. So anyway, so thanks, James, for jumping in. Anyone else? Any other comments before we continue from James or anyone else?
I mean, I concur. I mean, I agree that more trees are good, but they're definitely no silver bullet. One of the things I would like to focus on is like more harm reduction. Like I think there's like a third as much carbon in like the marshes and swamps than like is even stored in like most of the like forest still remaining. And if we're are all connected like globally, as you said, I mean that means it's all of our resources too. So that's all I have for the moment.
Yeah, good stuff, Alchemy. And this is a really good point because see, right now we're just hemorrhaging carbon into the atmosphere, and in the form of, you know, not just CO2 but methane in the northern latitudes from all the melting permafrost, right, and the big belches that are starting and on path to accelerate from the ocean floor, right, up around the Arctic. So it's time to break out the big guns and put an end to this madness. It's time to forcibly cool the planet, because then with a cool planet, we restore the jet stream, the Gulf Stream, Earth's vital systems, right? We're like a patient who just got run over by a, I don't know, steamroller. And yes, it's going to take serious intervention, right? Pilates ain't going to do it for homeboy when he's got massive internal bleeding, right? It's time for the big guns, the big therapies. What a great conversation, right? All right, jump in anytime, y'all, just like I just jumped in, and don't hesitate. Shall we go back to reading?
Yep.
All right, and y'all feel free to direct traffic just like I did, okay? Just jump in, and hey, I want to talk about that. Okay, so I'm going to start from the beginning again. The age of needless catastrophe. We have the tools to solve the biggest problems of now. Yes, on this we agree. What we don't have is the power to use them. I agree on that too. We need to develop that power. Did you know that we could mitigate the worst effects of climate change simply by planting trees? It wouldn't take all the techno sci-fi scenarios of current day mythology: seawalls, humongous barriers, engineered atmospheres, artificial skies. Nope, just trees. And yet you and I both know that it won't happen. Why not? Because there's no money in it. There's no money. There's money in chopping down trees. And since profit is what runs the global economy, thanks to America, the odds of a global wave of tree planting are about as likely as you winning the lottery. So get ready for severe climate change, even though all we'd have to do to mitigate it is plant trees. Bullshit. Excuse me. We're people so powerless that thanks to capitalism, we can't even plant trees. If that sounds a little bit like serfdom to you, now that striking fact made me think. Do you see the point hidden in it? We have the solution we need. No, it's not the only solution. We also have to reduce emissions and decrease our dependence on fossil fuel, says Umair. We also have to do SRM, says us, but at least the beginnings of one. And yet we won't apply it. We can't. Our systems and institutions and ideologies are the things which won't let us. Let me make that even sharper. It's not that we don't have answers to this century's great challenges. We do. What we don't have is the will, the power, the insight, the sheer common sense to apply them. Now, I'm going to go off red and start commenting again, because not only is Umair missing SRM, he's missing the other great transformation, the other great solution that we need to implement, which is to stop eating meat, right? And animal agriculture. That's what's destroying the forest more than anything else, more than logging, more than, you know, living space for humans, building out more suburbs, whatever. It's animal agriculture. That's why the Amazon is so decimated, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing is, if we ended animal agriculture, there would be nothing left to do with those lands but let them go back to nature. Nature does a great job of bouncing back as long as she's not going up in flames like Australia or the American West, where I live, right? And where alchemy lives, right? So the two things that we need to do, the two biggest changes that we need to ultimately get to, right, are solar radiation management and ending animal agriculture. Yes, going vegan, everybody, right? Not just those who want to because it's cool. We all have to do it, right? And going vegan means we need to sacrifice something. But to do SRM, we don't need to sacrifice anything with $10 billion, which is rounding error. It's rounding error for the US military, let alone the global economy, right? $10 billion is nothing. That would be the total budget to cool the planet using marine cloud brightening, right? But we can't even get our act together to not sacrifice in the case of SRM. Ending animal agriculture is going to involve some sacrifice for sure. But, what are the two solutions that Umair talks about? Planting trees and reducing our dependence on fossil fuels. Both those are great things, right? But they're not as big or impactful, either of them, right now, as solar radiation management combined with ending animal agriculture.
I'm also curious, like he says that like people don't have the power. I mean, I can understand. I mean, what's stopping like just like some people from every community to like reenact the Johnny Appleseed and go across like spreading seeds? Like it's definitely not really. I mean, of course, in like urban places, like you need a license for it. But I'm curious why he says we have the tools, but we can't use them. That could you clarify, maybe, Jamie?
I'm happy to share my thoughts. I'd love everyone to share thoughts on that. I think there's two major things that are really stopping us that I see. One is that we are addicted to money and to possession, to ownership, from the richest to the poorest, by the way. I used to work for Bill Gates at Microsoft at the time. He was at the time the richest person in the world. And that guy has no peace, zero peace. Because he's not just addicted to what he has, he's addicted to having more. And then he's also addicted to the number one spot, right? Those are two addictions that no matter how many billions you have, you can't, there's no more billions doesn't cure those addictions. The addiction to every day having more, and the addiction to looking over your shoulder and making sure you're not past, oh shit, Jeff Bezos, oh my God, Elon Musk, right? And now that's the richest person in the world. The poorest person in the world is addicted to hoarding as well, but for them, it's from a very different dynamic. It's because they're starving to death, right? And they need to, scrounge up whatever scraps of food waste, garbage dump food, whatever, anything. And so I'm just looking at the two bookends, from the poorest person in the world to the wealthiest person in the world. Neither of those are free. Let's go to the middle, lower middle class. Those people are struggling. They want to own a home, get out of apartments and own a home, own a car, own a bicycle, own, get out of debt, get out of credit card debt. So what's my point here, Alchemy? It's that everyone is so addicted, from the poorest to the richest to everyone in between. I'm addicted to money, and it's liberating to actually say that and actually reflect on my life and how damaging this addiction is. I don't have to work, to make money. But my addiction and my lack of peace related to money is way worse than when I had nothing, when I was just, a kid or a student or whatever. And so I can attest for myself. I mean, it's just, I'm just thinking about it all the time. I'm constantly looking at the screen and seeing how I'm doing and this and that. So what's my point, Alchemy, is that from the richest to the poorest to everyone in between, we're all trapped in the all-day monopoly game of endless hoarding. Regardless of how much you have, you always have to have more. And that keeps us from going on a gentle walkabout, right? And, a gentle walkabout of planting trees and being Johnny Appleseed. We're all in a struggle for survival right now. So that's
So
one.
Amir thinks planting trees is the be all end all. We're all pretty much unanimous that it's going to take more than that.
Well, here's the thing. I'm first addressing why we're not out there planting trees right now, right? Is because we're so panicked, right? So trapped in the all-day Monopoly game, right? Think like a bunch of 10-year-olds who are just playing Monopoly. It's now 2 p.m. They've been playing for 4 hours. Their mother and grandmother and aunties are saying, "Go outside, get some exercise," and they're just like, "Shut up, shut up, shut up." Ugh. We're like that. So we're trapped. We're stuck. We're addicted to the money game, the game of hoarding. But then the other thing I think that's making tree planting certainly not the only viable or even the biggest viable solution right now is the exponential planetary overheating. That, as per James' comment, that would only really start to weigh in on that after a decade or so, once the trees have reached a good size, or at least a few years, right? Right now there's so much heat, so much exponential overheating, so much drought, right? Soil erosion, et cetera. It's hard for the trees to take root, right? Now, what was your last question, Alchemy?
I don't recall, honestly.
But it was something like, or help us out, James, Alan, anyone. Anyway, I'm sure it'll come back as well.
I don't remember exactly the province, but I was watching this documentary. Like in Africa, they actually have to have some sort of, legislation is they have to have some sort of government official come and like give you like a license or like a registration, like to do exactly what Amir is talking about. And there's a group of women who, did just like on their own without any like backing or initiative begin reforesting. So I mean, I agree that in the Western, we're all caught up in like the day-to-day struggles, but I think that's kind of the point he's trying to make too. We have the ability, the tools are there, people aren't using them. So
yeah, and if you look at what we're doing here with the 24-hour collective intelligence block party, Dear Umair, the Glass Beads games, and so many other venues that we have here in this Zoom channel, the way I see it, we're reforesting, we're planting the trees of conversation, and we're reforesting the network of conversations. Right? Think of like, the Forum in ancient Athens. The Forum, that one giant plaza, right, was a forest of conversations. So we're reforesting the world with conversations that are essential to co-creating a collective superintelligence with which we can analyze and really deeply understand down to the roots our problems, but also co-create solutions. Not just think up the solutions, dream them up, but also figure out how to get them implemented, which is what we're doing right now by talking about the trees. We're saying, hey, we first need to cool the planet in order to be able to implement the trees, but we also need to address the roots, not just capitalism, but separation. We need a new story for humanity where we're all one human family, et cetera, right?
Yeah, exactly. Umair is writing the article. He's planting the seeds of thought, and we're facilitating the conversation for those, seeds of thought, and we're expanding on it and looking for, as James said, conversation turns into solutions, and that's how we're going to get things done if we come together to do that.
Exactly. Exactly. Well said, James. Thank you. What a great conversation, right? And I want to be clear. I have so much love for Umair. Umair, and I hope you watch this. We love you. We so love you. We're not going to agree on everything. If we did, it'd be, what a waste that would be. It's super valuable that we have different perspectives and we bring them together and we make them collide in a very nonviolent, even loving way, because we all want the same thing. We want life to continue, not just our lives, but all life, the full diversity of life. And it's through conversation that we're able to do this. So thank you.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to say it did sound like as if we're coming down and Umair there, and by no means are we doing that. I have to just say I was quite taken aback by when he mentioned that that was the way to solve the climate situation was by just planting trees. So I was taken aback by it. So, but yeah, this is what we're here for. We're here to discuss, and I'm quite sure Umair would respect our opinions, whether he agrees with them or not. Everyone, we're only discussing his article and. By no means knocking it in any way or any shape or form.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Good stuff, you guys.
Could you put the red background back in? I'm interested
totally.
in it.
Thank you. Yep, putting it back. Thanks, Alchemy. All right, so continue reading. Let me make that even sharper, continues Umair. It's not that we don't have answers to the century's great challenges. We do. What we don't have is the will, the power, the insight, the sheer common sense to apply them. See, again, I don't think it boils down just to that. We have to dig deep to get to the roots of our stuff, right? It's not that we lack common sense. It's not that we lack power. We have so much latent power. It's not that we lack insight. We're just gushing with insight here, there, and everywhere. What we need, sorry, I'm gonna have to change my virtual background again, just to be consistent. What we need is to master this hyperobject of humanity's interaction with each other and with Mother Earth holistically. We have to master the whole hyperobject. It doesn't boil down to even any bulleted list. Again, I'm going to read through the bulleted list that he says. What we don't have is the will, the power, the insight, the sheer common sense. No, we've got all those things. What we don't have, what we lack, is very simple: mastery of the hyperobject, which I've been writing about lately. What is the hyperobject? It's the whole of all this at all these layers. Think of a multi-layer cake. Where at the bottom, we've got the roots of our problems, right? And at the top, we have just this amazing potential. The more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. We know a more beautiful world is possible. All right, how do we get there? And then there's all the layers in between. Capitalism is somewhere in the middle. Beneath that is, separation, right? Is that the ultimate root? I don't know, probably. Separation, right? The agricultural revolution is seen as another one of the roots, right? So many roots to our problems. Here,
I think it's funny that I'm sorry, James.
Yeah, no, go.
I think it's funny that we keep using tree metaphors to talk about the issue. I found it a little bit amusing, but just there's like 80 billion, roughly 80 billion, humans on the planet right now. I mean, if in their lifetime, like everybody had an obligation to just plant one tree, yeah, we still have all the other stuff like to contend with, but I imagine that would at least, bump the percentages in our favor. It's really not, as he's saying, like, is insurmountable like a task if you like think about it in those terms. Pass.
Good stuff, Alchemy. I'm gonna pull up a slide that we worked on a few months ago that kind of puts in visual form what I've been talking about. James, would you make the other Jamin co-host, please?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. Okay. This is a slide, again, that we put together a few months ago. Look at the layers of the hyperobject, right? First, I'm just gonna, if I can ask you to just follow my lead rather than wander all over. I'll walk you through this, okay? Look first at the left column. Just look at the left column, okay? These are the headers for each row. Forget about everything to the right of this gray vertical line, right? This thick gray. Forget about everything to the right for the moment. Just look at the left. We have root causes, since as Alchemy was mentioning, the tree metaphor. Then we have chronic world problems that have been with us seemingly, for a long, long time. Then we have acute world problems, more like on the surface, that are popping up now. And then we have solutions, right? And then at the very top, we have what I call meta solutions. So if this gear here representing a solution, right, is a golden egg, what is the goose that lays the golden eggs, right? So again, I'm gonna have to pause for a second, you guys. I apologize. Getting a call from family. I'll be right back. All right, after a couple minutes pause there to take an important call. So again, on the left side, we've got the headings for each of these layers, from root causes all the way up to meta solution, the goose that lays the golden eggs of actual solutions to these layers of problems. 2 layers of problems, 1 layer of solutions, 1 layer of meta solution, and 1 layer of root causes. So the root causes that I was talking about, there's our evolutionary history, right? And one of my academic friends literally says, we are a shit species. We're like an evolutionary mistake that's just like a cancer on the planet. What has that cancer done? Look at these cancer lines: totalitarian agriculture. Now, this is row crop agriculture, which is bad enough. The big offender is animal agriculture. But anyway, those are both facets of totalitarian agriculture per Daniel Quinn. We have separation, like I was talking about earlier, as a root cause. We have dark forces and shadow. Is there evil in the world? Is there this thing called Satan or dark demons or whatever? Okay, great. Or not. Okay, then we have chronic world problems that stem immediately. I talk about the cancer, right? We have overpopulation. That's a direct result of totalitarian agriculture, right? Which in turn maybe was a result of our evolutionary history leading to this shit species that doesn't know how to do anything but destroy and dominate, right? One person condition to rule and control. The media sells it and you play your role. Anyway, Ozzy Osbourne, 1980.
Mental wounds are healing.
Oh yeah, mental wounds aren't healing. Driving me insane. Anyway, so yeah, this whole crazy train, is this just the result of these dominoes of evolutionary history leading to where we are? Then we have politics, economics, and our entire set of living arrangements, right? Growth, progress. Whoa, that's a chronic problem, because progress, as we define it, is chopping down more trees, laying more asphalt and concrete. And then, organized crime. As far as I'm concerned, the Nazis are a form of organized crime. The whole Trump administration, organized crime. The whole MAGA, Make America Great Again, all the fascism, racism, totalitarianism, authoritarianism that's creeping in here. These are all forms of organized crime. I've received death threats from criminal drug cartels stemming from the work I've done with President Vicente Fox around legalization of cannabis and other drugs, right? Anyway, all these forms of organized, these are chronic. Okay, and then acute problems that are on the surface, hunger, right? That's not a chronic world problem. It certainly doesn't have to be. But because of inequality and separation, we literally don't even cough up a tiny fraction of our wealth to end hunger. We have the destruction of the biosphere and extinction. We have pandemics, exponential planetary overheating. Umair talks a lot about inequality, stagnation, both of those, and all these others leading to economic collapse. Okay, enough of 3 layers of darkness. Now let's look at solutions, mega solutions. There are solutions in the realm of economic and political transformation, right? That get to the, oh, I should have been moving this other mouse the whole time. Sorry, I got 2 screens going. Economic and political transformation that get to the roots of politics, economics, and our entire set of living arrangements. We have veganism, which takes the biggest possible bite out of totalitarian agriculture, which is animal agriculture. We have a new story for humanity. We're a species that runs on stories. This story can address all these root problems, right? If we have a great, empowering, inspiring story that helps, fuel economic, political, and cultural transformation. We have solutions to eradicate the coronavirus. Umair has written so much about, if we just vaccinated the world, we could do it for a few $billion, right? What the hell? We have solar radiation management. This row continues, planting trees, right? Decarbonizing, universal basic income falls within here, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, this is just kind of just a sample of a much bigger menu. And then meta solution, how are we going to generate all these specific solutions, right? Well, we have the topic of the urgency and criticality of collective superintelligence. If we don't know that collective superintelligence is even a thing, a possibility, how are we going to get urgent around it? How are we going to put focus on it? What is collective superintelligence? It needs to be designed. Elements of it are designed, and some of us have big visions around it, but it's not a thing yet. People dreamed of automobiles, self-propelling mechanized automobiles, years and decades before Henry Ford and Mercedes. But so we got to put it together. We need to map out the whole journey to collective superintelligence, right? So all of this whole slide, which again is a sampling of a much bigger menu, that much bigger menu, okay, is what I call the hyperobject. Let's name it. It's got so many dimensions, so many layers, so many facets, that all of which needs to be mastered, right? It's not enough just to have a vaccine and a tree planting program, right? If you don't have a solid foundation, right? And a real mastery, not just of our chronic problems, our acute problems, but their roots, right? Because you need solutions that go that deep. And to be able to crank out all these wonderful solutions and implement them in the proper sequence, things that like start, for example, with, for me, the way to, I mean, I'm kind of cutting to the chase here and we'll get back to this, but the way to start all these dominoes tumbling, V for Vendetta style, to solve all of our problems, we need SRM, veganism, and feeding everyone. Veganism and feeding everyone are wrapped into food healers, which we're implementing in Los Angeles. Thank you, V for Vendetta. Thank you, Alchemy. That's right. The V for Vendetta dominoes, right? The first domino that can really get this whole thing tumbling is food healers. Because once we do food healers, we start to see clearly, that we're all one because we're feeding each other, right? We're acting our way into a new level of thinking rather than always trying to think our way into a new level of action. Anyway, all this needs to be thought about strategically. We also need to pay very close attention to this top layer, and all of this and the whole thick multi-page menu, of which this is just a sampling, albeit an important one, I would say. We need more than what this is more than what a human mind can wrap their heads around. There's hundreds of PhD theses worth of work here. We need a whole vast network of collective intelligence, a network of conversations being the most dynamic and visible outcropping of it. You know, we also do a lot of great individual thinking. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to take this beautiful slide out of your faces, and we're going to get back to reading, unless anyone else has anything to say before I continue reading. And by the way, again, all of this was a response, however passionate, to Umair's words, which for me are a great oversimplification. And I'm going to reread this. It's not that we don't have answers to this century's
great...
Huh?
Or read.
Well, I'm still ranting. I'm just reading a little snippet, but thank you, James. Good call. Good call. Again, because I'm just rereading here. It's not that we don't have answers to this century's great challenges. We do. What we don't have is the will, the power, the insight, the sheer common sense to apply them, right? See, what I'm just saying, that's an oversimplification. If I were Umair writing here, I would have written, we need to master the whole damn hyperobject, the whole menu of all the layers, from root causes to meta solution. Anyway, end of rant. Anything more to say before we keep reading?
No, carry on.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate everybody's inputs. And now I'm going to reread that last couple sentences that I just read. It's not that we don't have answers to this century's great challenges. We do. What we don't have is the will, the power, the insight, the sheer common sense to apply them. I want you to stop and think about that for a moment. Just how, as they'd say in the neck of the Virginia woods I grew up in, how bass-ackwards that is. How bass-ackwards that is. Here is what's really striking, bizarre, upside down about this age. The world has 4 big existential problems this century: climate change, inequality, stagnation, and fascism. The strange, maddening, and bizarre truth about this juncture of history is that we have the tools to solve all of them. We have the solutions to these big problems. What we don't have is the will, the power, or the courage to apply them. In other words, my friends, the 21st century is first and foremost a crisis of leadership. I'm laughing because, again, the words of Ozzy Osbourne, one person conditioned to rule and control. And by the way, there's some great comments that we'll get to that go after this notion of leadership. We'll get to those. Our institutions and systems are treating us like dunces, and we are happily obliging. Now, let me prove that by way of contrast with the 1930s. In the 1930s, we had no idea whatsoever how to solve the problems of economic stagnation. We, meaning thinkers and intellectuals and whatnot, hadn't quite traced the link yet. Capitalist economies stagnate after they overheat, As capital takes more and more gains, it leaves less for labor. People's living standards begin to decline. They have to take on debt just to make ends meet. But indebted, the vicious cycle of inequality and stagnation only bites down harder. Bang, the result is a wave of authoritarian fascism. Weimar Germany became Nazi Germany just this way. But so did Bolshevik Russia turn into Stalinist Russia. Thus, the theme is eternal. When a middle class that aspires upwards finds its fortunes in stark, steep decline, it turns to demagogues who promise it strength, safety, security, and plenty. Those demagogues inevitably say to the declining middle, "You shall have the riches you deserve. All that you must do is take them from the subhumans. They are the cause of your poverty." Sound familiar? Later thinkers would put all that this way. Capitalism implodes into fascism. Keynes, oh, shoot. I'm sorry. I need to hit the wrong link there. Almost there. Keynes, Adorno, pardon my French, but Baudrillard, Foucault, the Frankfurt School, would all build on Marx's insights and develop just this strand of thinking. Though America, wedded to capitalism like a suicide bride, would never understand. I love Umair's writing. Oh my goodness, even though I disagree with most of it. But at a very radical level, on the surface, he's nailing it. The answer we understood after so much devastation, so much war, so much poverty was just this. Societies had to invest in themselves so that economies would never again fall into the trap of capitalist stagnation, the rich taking too much and leaving nothing for middles, who then turned to authoritarian fascism. So the reverse of what most people think is true. If I ask the average person, do you think the big problems of this century are climate change, stagnation, inequality, and fascism? Most sensible people would probably agree with me, although Fox, F-A-U-X, fake news, although Fox News viewers might call for me to be lynched, but that only proves my point. If I asked them, do you think we have the solutions to these problems? They'd vehemently shake their heads and shout, no, of course not. If we had the solutions, don't you think we'd apply them? Dummy. But none of that is remotely true. We have the solutions to all our problems in this century, when a new dark age seems to be falling. Let me make those clear. Climate change, plant trees. Tax and cap carbon, crack down on the 100 or so companies responsible for 70% of emissions. Simple, job done. No need to build the seawalls and barriers, probably. Stagnation and inequality, invest in average people heavily, even if it means giving them what's called helicopter money. In the 1930s, even if we understood that sudden, fresh precarity and poverty produced fascism, what could we have done about it? Not much. But today, the central bank can literally zap money to everyone in seconds. We could all set up an account with a central bank, and it could give us money every single month, day, hour, second, if it wanted. We have the tools to solve the problems of stagnation and inequality. We just don't want to use them. We are in this particular debate, where we are in this particular debate is in white guy land. White guy land. We, or rather they, debate, or rather pretend to debate, some abstruse combination of taxes and policies and whatnot. For example, even when it comes to planting trees, they seem to be most concerned with the intricacies of all the ways it wouldn't work. All of that only proves one point. We know how to solve these problems. We could literally solve stagnation and inequality tomorrow by zapping people from central bank apps or websites. Problem solved, done, finished. We don't, though. Most of us, including you, think such a thing is impossible. But there is a big, big difference between impossible and untenable. Impossible means we can't do it. Untenable means we can't entertain the notion. Solving our big problems these days is untenable, not impossible. It's untenable to our leaders mostly, whether they're Trump's or Mitch McConnell's or Ezra Klein's or Chris Hayes's or David Brooks's or CEOs and hedge fund managers and so forth. This class of people, the wise, or is it white, men of American capitalism, seems to believe that using the tools we have to do anything about our problems is what would really melt down the world, not the world actually melting down. What the? They literally think backwards. They've lost the ability to reason. The question is whether you're following their lead. Let's take the last big challenge of this century, fascism. How to solve it? Well, how did we do it last time? We passed hate speech laws and made it illegal to belong to fascist organizations and made an international criminal court. All of that took decades, by the way. The ICC wasn't set up until the 90s, International Criminal Court. If we wanted to take our fascists on, we would simply have to begin by using these institutions. America is a case study in getting it wrong. It never signed up to the ICC. And so genocide has been committed in border concentration camps. Hardly a surprise that you end up run by fascists when you won't sign up to laws outlawing them. Duh. Or pandemics. The defining catastrophe of now is COVID. And the hard truth is that much of its devastation has been needless. The COVID vaccines were all funded by taxpayer money. They were made in public institutions. And yet Western countries at the World Trade Organization simply allowed the vaccine patents to be privatized. So now only a handful of places can manufacture vaccines that the world needs, which means cases of COVID are outpacing vaccinations, which means new variants are being created. Newer, more lethal, more transmittable, more vaccine-resistant variants. All because vaccines were privatized so that pharmaceutical companies could get very, very rich. Companies that were betting on COVID going permanent so they could make the greatest profit in the history of human civilization. That's the very definition of a needless catastrophe. And yet COVID is a needless catastrophe in a larger way as well. Pandemics are spreading faster and harder. SARS, MERS, COVID. precisely because more than half of humanity lives in abject poverty without decent sanitation, water, food, or healthcare. If we really wanted not to be ravaged by pandemics, we would begin giving everyone around the globe basic public goods and protecting wildlife too. See my point? We have the tools to solve our problems in this age, or at least make a solid, fierce beginning that goes a very long way to solving them. What we don't have is the will, the courage, the freedom, the power to use any of those tools. We are so powerless in this age, in fact, that we literally can't even plant trees to stop the planet melting down. Tell me again how the fascists and capitalists don't run the world. Even Stone Age people could plant trees, my friends. This is why everything feels so surreal. It's not that crises are overtaking us. It's that we are powerless to use the tools right in front of our faces to solve them. Those tools are like beautiful objects kept in glass cases, which we can admire, but never touch, handle, or use. We sit there staring at those tools, wondering why our world is going to hell. The answer, my friends, is smashing the glass. History will remember this century as the most foolish kind of time, not just a time of severe crisis, strain, and fracture, but a time when none of that had to happen at all. Our great grandkids, yes, don't worry, the human race isn't going to go extinct. It's just that societies like America and Britain are more or less finished. Our great grandkids will shake their heads incredulously and say something like, but why didn't they do anything about it when they had the answers? What kind of dunces were they exactly? And history will do what it always does to dunces, laugh and ruin them. This century isn't a crisis of technology, of money, or of democracy. First and foremost, it is a crisis of leadership. Our leaders appear to be totally out to lunch, having a picnic and a frolic while the world burns. They are the ones who are holding the tools we already have hostage, tools that we should be using every day now to solve the world's big problems. History will remember them with scorn and mockery and disgrace them. The question for the rest of us is this: do we understand yet that a better world is within our grasp to shape? Only then do we give ourselves the power to shatter the glass and build it. Umair. Gentlemen.
Well,
That was the entire article.
That was it. Now, there are some great comments written, and I think some of those would be great to read, if not all of them. But go ahead, James. Go ahead.
no, I'm just saying I just have a couple of comments myself anyway as well. Like, you might as well see, we already been saying there like that if we plant the trees, there might not be any need for sea barriers or sea walls and barriers. And, again, like, just reiterating the point, like, what he's not taking into consideration there is the built-in heating which the science has already told us like that there's over 40 years of built-in heating. Even if we stopped carbon reduction, now that heating we're still going to have to deal with the effects of that as well. So like our climate is getting, and the global warming is getting worse, and already has 40 years of built-in heating, regardless of what we start or put into it now or try now. The only thing that we can try now is to cool the heat, to reduce the heating. And global warming is also a needless catastrophe because it could have been prevented. The science is well known about the heating, but profit took precedent, and no pandemic is profitable. So at the end of the day, we're just customers in their game, like. And I agree with Umar on that stage, like. But we're allowing all this to happen, and by us, I mean the people basically are allowing this to happen. Majority of us can see that that the antics of the Republican Party, the Trump Party, it doesn't matter, the politicians all over the world, it's blatantly fucking ridiculous. And some of the decisions, and majority of the past decisions, have been proven to be, mistakes, no good for the people. They're not for the people. They're always thought about for profit and at the end of the day. So, I mean, there won't be a history at the end of the day if we don't do something about the global warming. And it is only going to be the people that can do something about it, because we can't look to our leaders, is what I'm saying. And they're not talking about revolution or anything like that, like violent revolution or anything. I'm talking about the revolution you're proposing, a revolution of humanity through collective intelligence, through actual getting together and having conversations and coming up with the solutions and figuring out a way of implementing them, pushing our governments, make our governments work for us for the change, and this time actually work by doing the right things for our benefit, not for their fucking benefit. They are our governments, and we did elect them into power at the end of the day. We can fucking get rid of them too at the end of their political run. So point is, we do actually have the power. We just need to get ourselves together and collectively get our shit together and come up with the solutions and the plans. And it all starts with marine cloud brightening and solar radiation management to buy us the time to do that. That's my anyway out.
And in the meantime, I mean, plant trees. It's not going to hurt anything.
By all means.
Let me welcome back Sarah. Sarah, sister. We needed the divine feminine in the house, and here you are. Welcome back. How you doing? And we are recording.
Making stew.
Oh, good. Now, see, Sarah is doing what I mentioned a bit ago as the crucial first domino in the V for Vendetta dominoes. I know Alchemy knows what I'm talking about. For in case anyone doesn't, in the movie V for Vendetta, there were 2 rows of dominoes, which then enforcated into many other rows. But there was one domino at the very beginning that started a chain tumbling, and then it went into 2, and then into many. And in the end, it went full circle and knocked over every domino in the whole formation, creating a beautiful pattern. And the very first domino that I suggest is exactly what Sarah is doing, led by Sarah. A bunch of us are supporting, but Sarah is right there on the front lines with Annie V and many others, many other volunteers, feeding everyone plant-based foods for free, right? Undermining simultaneously animal agriculture, systemic endemic violence, malnutrition, hunger, capitalism, separation, right? Hoarding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And she's making the stew right now. Boom. There we have the first domino tumbling in front of our very eyes. Thank you, Sarah. Bless you, Sarah. Bless you, bless Annie, bless all of you for doing what you're doing. That stew is going to feed a bunch of people tomorrow. Look at the rice, look at the beans, look at the produce. And there's another way that we're undermining capitalism, is that Sarah and company are getting the vast majority of this food, all the fresh produce, donated. donated for free. Sure, occasionally we have to buy things like rice and sweet potatoes and whatever we're missing from the stew, right? So be it, right? But most of it's getting donated. And it's getting donated because there's a very simple, speaking of economics, a very simple fact, which is, anyway, I could go on, but we're basically overturning the old models of capitalism and hoarding and separation. And this is the first domino, because it's not just feeding people, it's changing people's minds and hearts and perspectives. We're showing the world that a new world is possible. Anyway, we are recording. We're doing Dear Umair. Sarah, are you cool? Are you cool with going with the flow? Because I know we're in the Food Healers evening segment time slot right now, but we're also on a roll with Dear Umair. So I just wanted to check in with you, Sarah, how you feel about that. And I'm going to pause recording for a moment. All right, after a brief pause, Sarah, thank you so much for your flexibility and for everything you're doing. You are just a shining example of a human being. You, Annie V, everybody there involved in Food Healers. We had Caesar on last Friday. So many cool people doing so much cool stuff. So God bless. And onward with the conversation. Alchemy, I don't know if you were about to say something a little bit ago. No pressure. Just jump in.
I'll say it now since you put me on. Really, like I like the idea of getting the dominoes set up and getting the ducks in a row and everything. But while we're doing that, like an all hands on deck, like, spaghetti on the wall approach is also, I think, called for. That was a comment.
Totally agree. And to my ears, what that sounds like is the path to collective superintelligence, getting everyone into the network of conversations, right? And when I say everyone, what I really mean is a critical mass of us, which can be a tiny, tiny, tiny percent of humanity participating. So just do the following mental model with me, okay? What would happen if we had 8,000 people, okay, in conversation, not in one conversation, but say in 1,000 different conversations? 8,000 people in 1,000 different conversations. How many people per conversation on average? 8. 8,000 divided by 1,000 is 8. 8 people per conversation. There are 5 people in this conversation, right? 8's a good number. Now imagine, just imagine that those 1,000 conversations were all being recorded. This one's being recorded, transcribed. We have the technology for that. Thank you, Otter AI and many other teams working on that. And imagine that those 8,000 transcripts, those 1,000 transcripts of those 1,000 conversations was constantly being indexed in real time. So that, just imagine that we had something that looked like a star chart. James, if you want to throw up your beautiful painting, James is an artist. There in Cork, Ireland. One of his, and that's only if it's convenient, James. If it's not, don't worry about it. But one of his beautiful paintings is of like a star chart, like a slice of the heavens. And you see all these different bright lights, stars. Imagine that we could see something like that, a representation of these 1,000 conversations, such that, listen to this, while we're talking, we could see through the transcript and through pattern matching, we've got this technology galore. We could see other conversations of the 1,000 kind of lighting up on our dashboard for this conversation, showing us, hey, these are the other conversations of those 1,000 that are talking about things that are either identical, symbiotic, or the opposite. Literally arguing the opposite. Why not? And we could see these things lit up in different colors. And then if somebody wanted to, they could say, hey, I love what we're talking about here so much. I want to see the conversation that's arguing the opposite point of what we're arguing, right? Like we could be arguing that separation and capitalism are the root cause of all our problems, da, 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 da. And we say, show us the opposite. And there could be a bunch of, freaking, I don't know, Republicans in Alabama. Some of my grandfather's from Alabama, so I can talk trash. I got some Alabama in me. They were arguing for capitalism as the answer. That's the way forward. That's the way to progress and evolution. Okay, great. I might head over there, or Alchemy or Alan or any of us, Sarah, might head over to that other conversation as sort of an envoy of peace and of dialogue to say, hey, I noticed, because we took a look at the transcript and took a peek in, there's also other technologies out there that, like Fathom is a great example of a startup that's, well, I probably shouldn't even be talking about it, but anyway, there are companies out there that are cooking up really great ways to get snippets of what people are saying. And so we could get a very compressed snippets, whether through text or little 10-second, 20-second video clips, and get the gist of what is being said in another conversation, and then choose, hey, I'm going to go over there as an envoy and just really get into it. And then maybe they might send some folks over here. We have a mashup, we have a mixer. We could even cross streams, bring these two conversations together and see where we go. See if we can reach some sort of a synthesis. Everything I'm talking about, everything I've talked about in the last few minutes, that's collective intelligence. That's collective intelligence, a network of conversations. Can you imagine how exciting it would be for these 1,000 conversations to connect? Each time we read a transcript from another conversation, that's a connection. Each time we watch a 20-second video synthesis of what the heck they're talking about right now, that's a connection. Each time we send an envoy over from this conversation to the other, that's a connection. Each time we cross streams, that's a mega connection. Oof, it's like a merger, but then we can also branch out again, right? We want to keep talking about anti-capitalism. We want to keep talking about pro-capitalism. Okay, fine. Branch away. Maybe we reconnect in a half an hour or in 5 minutes, right? These are all connections. Now, inside my brain, cracking open the head. Thank you, Daniel Pinchbeck. If we break open the brain, break open the head, and look inside my brain, we got a bunch of neurons that are connected through synapses. Neurons are firing, they send messages to other neurons, and in the end, a bunch of words comes out of my mouth, and I think I'm smart, right? It's a neural network that's producing all this, okay? Now, by analogy, these 1,000 conversations connected by, I've been calling them connections of different kinds, but think of them as synaptic connections, and think of each conversation as like a giant neuron that's pulsing, that's sending signals to the other neurons. See how fractal that is, right? I started off one person, here in my room, reading Umair's article, and then I said, hey, let's have a conversation. Next thing you know, there's 8 of us, and we're talking. And then expand out. Now there's 1,000 conversations that we're connected to. Okay, so that scenario of 8,000 people having 1,000 conversations that are hyperconnected, creating essentially a giant brain, a giant hyperconnected brain, harnessing the mental power, creativity, insights, experience, knowledge, etc., not just of 8,000 people, but of 8,000 people working together, right? That's super powerful. And we can achieve that with, let's see, 8,000 people. What fraction of humanity is 8,000 people? Is it 1/1000th of humanity? Anyone want to do the math and tell me what fraction of the world's population 8,000 people represents? What fraction of the human population is 8,000 people? Can anyone tell me?
Uh, 8 billion. So one. I don't know, one
Point
million.
0.0004, like all the way when you go point all the way over to four.
Okay, so to figure out the fraction, let's do the math here. To figure out what fraction of humanity 8,000 people represents. So I'm going to type here in the chat an 8 with 9 zeros after it. That's 8 billion people. That's the human population divided by 8,000. That ratio, divide 8 billion by 8,000, you get 1 million. So the fraction of humanity that 8,000 people represents is 1/1,000,000th, not 1%, not 0.1%. That would be 1/1000th, not 100th%, not 1,000th%, but 1/10,000th of 1%, 1/1,000,000th of humanity. It takes one person in a million coming together to say, hey, I want to be part of that group of 8,000 folks, creating this collective intelligence. It only takes 1 in a million of us, right? There are many times 8,000 people reading Umair's articles. What's the point I'm getting at? Umair, the power to manifest collective intelligence at a very significant scale is in your hands, dear Umair. See? Andale. See, I had to say that in Mexican. See? Andale. I mean, there's some things you can only say in Mexican. There's some things you can only say in Korean. And see, that's part of the collective intelligence when we share. James says some things only in Irish that only he could say. Alan says some things only in Scottish that only he could say. Jimena says some things that can only be said in Mexican. I say some things that can only be said in Mexican, right? And so on. Umair, I bet you've got some sayings from Pakistan that just nail it. This is part of the collective intelligence. 1/1,000,000th of humanity. You can bring us together, Umair. Write an article saying, hey, I'm looking for 1 in a million of you. Imagine that. Imagine he were to actually write that in an article and say, I'm looking for 1 in a million of you to show up for something world changing. And let's say that 8,000 people show up. The word goes out. Hey, did you hear Umair? He's putting out a call. Yeah, we're going to meet on Friday and we're going to do this. Okay, great. 8,000 people show up. We have a way of organizing ourselves, either randomly or through some predefined taxonomy or whatever. But we certainly have the tools to organize 8,000 people. Shoot, I used to go to soccer games in Spain in 1982 where 30,000 people would show up, right? So we certainly have the technology to organize ourselves. Everyone found exactly the right seat they were supposed to go to. We know how to do it, okay? And we did it. We actually did it. You know what would happen? It'd be world news. 8,000 people come together in a network of conversations, recorded, transcribed, indexed, hyperlinked, with envoys, with cross-pollination, right? You know what happened a week later? 80,000 people would show up. And a week after that, 800,000. See, suddenly the brain is growing from 1,000 mega neurons. See, each conversation is a neuron, a mega neuron. 8 people talking like we're doing. I'm doing too much talking. I'm going to shut up. Somebody else grab the baton.
Sounds like a good segue into food healers.
Well, see, here's the thing. It could be a great segue to food healers. What if those 8,000 people took on a common challenge of how do we feed everyone? Listen, it only takes one of those conversations to be 8 people involved in food healers. Could be the 5 of us plus a handful of other folks, right? You know what would happen? We would benevolently infect and affect the course of history of many other conversations that would be watching what we're doing and saying, whoa, they're actually doing it. Wait a second. So that's Sarah Siegel? Is that Sarah Siegel? Yeah, she's, you'd have a whole bunch of people coming to this conversation. Let's say we had 200 people in the conversation because Sarah's there leading Food Healers Los Angeles. And then she'd say, oh my God, what do I do with all of you? And then somebody would say, well, I know. Tell us your top 10 problems, Sarah, and we'll go into 10 different breakout rooms of 20 people each of the 200 people that showed up because Sarah was there. Let's have 10 different breakout rooms of 20 people each to solve, Sarah, your 10 biggest problems in like an hour. What's your biggest problem? I think it's volunteers. Money isn't the problem. You have all the money you need. It's volunteers. You end up doing too much work by yourself. One breakout room could solve that. 20 people on the task of, you see what I'm saying? It only takes 1/1,000,000th of humanity to get food healers to go exponential. If anyone doesn't understand what I just said or doesn't believe it, please speak up and I'll clarify it because we're really onto something here. Thank you, Sarah. I know Sarah gets it. Oh, I'm talking to myself. Yeah, I'm talking to myself. If I had the chance, I'd ask the world to talk, but I'm talking with myself. Whoa, oh, oh, oh. Whoa, oh, oh, oh. Yeah, go ahead.
You're not talking to yourself at all. I'm just trying to I'm taking in what you're saying. I mean, I don't know. I get what you're saying. I know where we're coming from. This Umair doesn't know where we're coming from in a sense, and his audience, and so. But it only takes a certain amount to work on a certain and to get momentum, like, and yeah, this is it. Like, I mean, people just don't realize it. That's what I'm saying. It's like you said, like or it's like Umair said himself there in one of his own articles recently that Republicans don't see that they're bringing fascism into their lives. Like they can't see the wood for the trees, basically. Like, and people can't see the wood for the trees when it comes to climate or the fact that powers that be, or the 1% are pulling the fucking wool over people's eyes. You know what I mean? So they're too busy with their lives, as you said, like fucking struggling from day to day and everything, to actually be able to get a chance to see half the problems or be aware of half the problems. Problems that they believe that they have no agency about. And that's what we need. That's the point. That's what we need to do, is create the awareness that we do have the agency. So,
And once people like catch on to that fact, I mean, networking is going to help, but it's the contributions to the individual still, which can be done in the here and now. Enough individuals acting independently, and you will still reach that tipping point.
I say no. Individuals acting independently is precisely our problem, right? I have to pause for a quick second. But you carry on. I just got to deal with a family thing here super quick.
yeah, I would agree there as well, that I don't like independent. There's nothing wrong with it, and I don't have a problem with it. But what I'm saying is, independent actions is the problem, in the sense that there's loads of people out there that are trying to be, change makers and everything else. But the problem that exists is that we're not all connected, as Jamin is proposing, that we get connected on in a network situation where we're actually agreeing to collectively gather our collective knowledge to come up with the solutions. You know what I mean? So we have to agree to collectively work together, in other words, like, and set our differences aside, or egos aside, or ambition for profit aside. It's about saving our asses now at this stage, like. And yeah, a lot of people would think that's far-fetched, but I don't think it's far-fetched by no means. I mean, even the IPCC, in their mild, way of putting it, like, say we have 10 years to do something drastic, or we're in big trouble. Well, we actually have less than that, and we are already in the big trouble.
I don't think I have anything more to add. Thank you, everyone, for giving me a platform to express my views.
No problem, Malcolm. Glad to have you here, man. You know what I mean? That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys, I'm back. Just had to deal with something real quick, but I overheard a little bit about what James was saying. We're 8 billion people sitting back, metaphorically watching television, reading articles, saying, yeah, the world's going to hell, world's going to hell. The answer is the hyperobject. And what do you do when you have a hyperobject? You start talking about it. You start making collective sense of it. I'm saying we could do that with 1/1,000,000th of humanity, we could start to make sense of the hyperobject. Imagine we had these 1,000 conversations spread among the different points of the menu that I was showing earlier. And I'll put it back on in a second so you can see, Sarah, what I'm talking about. A 1,000 conversations could handle 1,000 topics and then connect to each other and start forming really rich connections. And we can start to figure, what is domino number one? In search of domino number one. Sarah, remember when I used to draw those pictures of one common domino, food healers, that would start solving both the human problems, feeding everyone, and the planet's problems, ending animal agriculture. One domino takes out, boom, both of those and starts both a human track and a planetary track with one domino. And out of so many conversations that we were having about that first domino, you know what happened? Sarah stood up and said, I'll do it. I'll do it. One person stood up and said, I'm going to do this. It's time. And look at where we are now. Tomorrow, you're going to feed how many hundreds of people? I don't know. It's happening. So yes, the power of one.
About 200. And I'm about to add the kale. I'm going to show you guys the progress real quick.
We're going to feed, yeah, we're going to feed 200 people.
Yeah.
Right?
So this is, Annie's pot is double the size of this. And we have Celia and we also have John. So I'm literally right now adding fresh organic kale that we got donated by Tamay. And you put this in at the end. This is all organic. We're giving this away for free. And then Annie even made, you didn't see Jane Unchained today. She made vegan donuts, chocolate vegan donuts. I'm going to show you what one looks like, okay? Just so y'all can get a taste of what good life is. You ready, Kevin? Annie made these vegan donuts, which I'm giving to my friend. But this one, look at this. Do you see that?
That's beautiful.
It's a homemade chocolate vegan donut with chocolate glaze and coconut on it. I didn't want the, so I just did the chocolate glaze like this. And they're all homemade and they're all gluten-free and they're all plant-based and they're all vegan and they're all gluten-free. No excuses that people can make now. It's all easy, but this is the last part of the stew where the kale goes on top. Yeah.
You've got the main course that's full spectrum nutrition. Every nutrient the human being needs is in that pot.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then we also, listen to this. We also have all of those peaches. We got organic peaches donated to us. All of that, we're making agua fresca and we're giving that out too. So I'm buying 5 gallons of water tomorrow and Annie's got the 2 containers and we just put the peaches in there and then all the water, and then you blend it together and it makes peach agua fresca and it makes everybody refreshed. It's organic and healthy. Isn't that amazing?
I love it.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I just wanted to show you the update. I'll be getting off soon.
I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, James, for the support too. And anybody that's on here. Jamin, of course, for helping us get started. And by the way, we did need all the sweet potatoes. So everything was perfect. And he said, no, we need all these. That's great. And I was like, okay. So it was worth all $11.60. Just FYI.
$11.60 were spent to top off the ingredients. The rest were donated, right? Now there may, if you include a little bit of,
I didn't have to use the pinto beans because Annie already soaked all the beans and did everything for me. And like I said, it's just unbelievable, everything coming together. I mean, this is just unbelievable.
I'm
If
gonna
you
pin.
smell,
Look at
yeah,
that.
if you could smell this, that's where you would just be flipping out. You know what I mean?
I'm already flipping out and I can't even smell it. This is collective intelligence in action right here. Right there. This was the product of collective intelligence. This was the product of relentless, repeated conversations. We meet on the topic of food healers for 5.5 hours every week, systematically. We've committed to it and we do it, right? We have Dr. Silas Rao on every Friday morning, right? And people every Friday evening and people every Thursday afternoon coming together and saying, we got to sort this out. This is just a handful of people. Now I'm saying, what if you put 8,000 of us together? 8,000 people could end hunger. I have no question about that. Sarah, do you have any question in your mind, any doubt in your mind that if 8,000 people came together to branch off into 1,000 different conversations covering every aspect of this, that we couldn't do something absolutely amazing in, say, I don't know, a 3 or 4 hour period? We're already hitting it outside the park with basically 8 people. Multiply us by 1,000 and see what we could figure out and in what period of time. It's a matter of focus, critical mass. Let me put up that slide. Sarah, this is a little bit of a blast from the past, but here, let me just get it up on the screen real quick. You remember this, Sarah? And if you're busy, don't answer me now. Right?
Yes, I do.
You know, imagine. So how many topics are there here? Well, how many squares are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, plus 4, 25. Okay. Spread amongst these 25 topics, 8,000 people. What is that? 320 people per topic? 320 people on each of these topics. 320 people just focusing on hunger. Think about how much progress we could make. 320 people just focused on the topic of separation as a root cause of our problems. 320 people talking about a new story for humanity. Right? Now, those 320 people might branch out into 40 different groups of 8. There could be 40 conversations on a new story for humanity, 40 conversations on ending hunger. Remember, we talked a little bit ago about having 10 conversations on ending hunger. What if we had 40? 40 different facets, everything from getting donated food, volunteers, logistics, government relations, private sector relations, nonprofit relations, religious relations, right? Nutrition, right? Veganism. How do we get full spectrum nutrition and make all this work within the constraints of veganism? Constraint my butt, right? Animal agriculture is the constraint. Okay, let's talk about animal agriculture. How do we relate with them? We've got answers to all these. How do we relate with animal agriculture? The RAP program, Rancher Advocacy Program, saying, hey, ranchers, we feel your pain. You're about to go extinct as an economic species. We have off-ramps from ranching, from capitalistic for-profit cattle ranching, pig ranching, chicken ranching, etc. Right? Rancher Advocacy Program, RAP. It's a wrap. Right? You name the facet, we put a team on it. I mean, am I missing something, or is not collective intelligence the answer to this whole hyperobject? Sarah, I was talking earlier about how the hyperobject spans all these layers. There's root causes, this whole bottom layer. These are all root causes. Then chronic world problems, then acute world problems, problems at the surface that are plaguing us right now. Mega solutions, right? Like food healers, right? I don't even have food healers on here. When we made this slide, food healers didn't even exist, right? This was one of the foundations that said, hey, wait a second, where do we need to start? Food healers, it was obvious, right? It popped out of this sort of analysis. And then the top level is meta solution, the goose that lays the golden egg of mega solutions. Each mega solution is a golden egg. Okay, what's the goose? It's called collective superintelligence, or CSI, right? Am I missing anything? Am I crazy? Right? By the way, when we start to run out of steam, and if we do, I'll start reading some comments from Umair's article. Look at the back and forth, the dialectic between reading and conversation. Give me a thumbs up if you want me to keep reading. And if you don't want me to keep reading, somebody say something.
Well, I'm just going to say, yeah, we could read one or two of the comments, but just before you do, I'm saying there, in regards to what you were just showing there, even back before, like when you were saying there, no, we were coming up with that chart, food healers didn't even exist at the time. And also with the solar radiation management, at that time we were focused on the MIRRORS project because it seemed like the most, the most efficient way to go and everything else. But yet since then we've come across the marine cloud brightening and the science behind that, which is a step up as far as we're concerned. So it's just the point that I'm making is that there's 8 of us here now, but there's a lot of us involved in the block party and the food healers and all the other different things that go on here on the block party, and we have made considerable difference and impact over the last year alone with just the group of people that we've had. And the idea that the idea behind their Umair as well is, I think, well, I want to get it through to him anyway, is that we're wholeheartedly behind his writings and everything else. Yeah, there's a few things we had issues with his article tonight, but that's a good thing. We're conversing about it. But he needs to realize that maybe that the problems are even worse than he's thinking, and maybe it's not as easy as he's thinking to get us out of it. And he needs to do a little bit of research. And I really wish he'd get on board and have a conversation with us. Yeah, let's have a listen to some of the comments from some of the readers.
Beautiful, James. But first, I want to second that invitation. Dear Umair, we need you here. Join us. This program has your name. It's inspired by you. You're the foundation for this. So join us. And where Umair goes, thousands of people will follow. That's inevitable. So Umair, if you like this idea of collective intelligence evolving towards collective superintelligence, join us and kick it off. And if you don't, please write an article about why I'm stupid, why I'm so misguided, and why collective superintelligence is just not the answer at all. No. What is the opposite the truth? Do we need more collective stupidity? I think we've given collective stupidity a pretty good run for the past 10,000 years. How well has that worked out for us? could we maybe try collective intelligence? Give it a try for a few months, just see. And if it doesn't work, we can always go back to collective stupidity. More thoughts, everyone, or should I keep reading?
Yeah, keep reading it. Jeff.
Okay. All right, will do. Again, we're reading the article called "The Age of Needless Catastrophe." Let's check out the comments. There was one comment here I really love. I'll read that first. It's from Chris Wilson. He writes, well, he's commenting on one line that Umair wrote, which is this, one snippet really. The 21st century is first and foremost a crisis of leadership. That's what Umair said. What does Chris Wilson say about that? The problem is not just a crisis of leadership, as in we just need to swap bad leaders for good leaders, right? The problem is the whole process of leadership itself. As a mechanism of social coordination, it has outlived its usefulness. More than that, the whole notion of someone in charge, I can't help it. One person conditioned to rule and control. The media sells it and you play your role. The whole notion of someone in charge, someone with all the answers, resources, and power to do whatever society needs. Sound familiar? Think Donald Trump, think Adolf Hitler. Someone in control, someone who can bring people to heel, whether by rewards or coercion. This notion stands in direct opposition to the needs of the time. What is the need of the time? Collaboration, cooperation, people working together. On no issue of importance to society, let alone from the more existential ones, does anyone have all the knowledge, resources, or power? I'm going to reread that last sentence. I'm going to paraphrase here. On no one single issue of importance to society, any one, the tiny one, garbage collection, whatever, let alone from the more existential ones, like the ones I just had on the slide there, like exponential planetary overheating, economic collapse, right? Hunger, starvation. On no one issue of importance to society, let alone from the more existential ones, does anyone have all the knowledge, resources, or power. The corollary of this is that many people have some elements of knowledge, resources, and power. Therefore, to move forward, all of these people must be involved and contribute both to designing solutions and implementing them in society. That means no one can be in charge. No one can be in control. And any individual attempt to exert control will undermine successful cooperation. This is why leadership is so problematic. It poisons the very thing we need to move forward. I know, people will say things like, well, what about servant leadership or collective leadership or community leadership? To wit, I would note that Harvard Business School Review lists over 50 different kinds of leadership, from bureaucratic to boundary spanning leadership to autocratic leadership. So leadership is a term that means different things to many different people. However, what generally falls under the rubric of leadership involves taking charge, imposing, managing, dominating, being in control, providing answers, finding fault, persuading, correcting, punishing, rewarding, or inciting fear. Even among charismatic and romanticized leaders, it is the will of the leader that ultimately prevails, albeit readily, over the will of followers. To wit, over time, leadership has traditionally been expressed in terms of the leader as cause, the great man theory, the person at the top of the hierarchy, the master chess player directing or manipulating. A collective game in which others play the role of pawns, inconsequential tools to be used or discarded at the leader's discretion. Leaders are in charge because it is believed that everything flows from them. Unfortunately, this concept is highly patriarchal and, at worst, it has been and still is responsible for some of the most unpleasant excesses in both organizations and in human civilization. Nevertheless, over the last 40 years, leadership has wormed its way into every discipline, every industry, every government, and every not-for-profit institution. Leadership is now widely regarded as the principal path to achievement, influence, wealth, and power. I think therein lies the key, right? Today, one cannot gain stature in any career without first being regarded as a leader, no matter what one's professional or technical expertise might be. Yet, despite our cultural attachment to it, the idea today that one person can be in charge of any kind of complex human organization is fast falling into disrepute. Despite the immense sums being spent on leadership training, there is no real evidence that it has made much of a difference. Here's a quote from Barbara Kellerman, the founding director of the Kennedy School's Center for Public Leadership, presumably at Harvard. Okay, here's her quote. "We are no more capable today of making good leaders or reducing the effects of bad leaders than we were 40 years ago." The failure of leadership is not simply because of a failure to produce enough good leaders. On the contrary, said David Brooks in a New York Times expose, it's because the entire leadership class is being exposed as ineffective or fundamentally self-dealing. The bottom line is that the problem of leadership, especially for government, is the growing perception that leaders generally are incapable of coordinating solutions in a complex society, either because they are incompetent, unethical, or ineffective, or all of the above. So if not leadership, what do we use to affect coordination in society? What do we call it when we have to help independent owners to work together? No one's in charge, but we embark on processes to get them to talk together, share the ideas, facilitate the development of plans, and cooperate on outcomes. Instead of followers acting simply as pawns and tools for the success of causal leaders, the work of followers must be seen as important in its own right. And the task of coordination boils down to catalyzing collective success. Traditionally, the term we've used is stewardship. Our whole management culture is based on the top-down model of leadership. Our institutions are structured on this model, but are quite incapable of dealing with the levels of diversity and complexity present themselves in modern life. However, we can change this old role of top-down leadership into one of stewardship, with leaders adopting the characteristics of educators, facilitators, brokers, networkers, and knowledge mobilizers. Not imposing control, but recognizing shared ownership and fostering a shared narrative about future possibilities. Stakeholders, too, can be transformed from followers to owners by participating in learning forums, communities of practice, and being mutually accountable. Our modern world can no longer afford its dependence on leadership. If we hold on to it, we will certainly fall back into a dark age, not unlike those when leadership so dominated human experience. We must embrace stewardship, but even more, we must embrace our shared ownership and act like owners, not like pawns which leaders can use and throw away. Now, there's one reply to Chris Wilson's awesome comment. Here's Chris Wilson, by the way. That's the guy whose comment I just read. Thank you, Chris. But do you have a comment before I read the comment written in response to what I just read?
Well, I mean, it sounds very familiar what he's proposing. Like it, you know, here we are, just been banging on about the same thing, very much the same in just different wording earlier on. Like, so he's on the right track. I applaud him for his comments, definitely. I mean, this is what we're proposing here. Like, is that it's down to the individual people themselves, like, to get together collectively and put their heads together to come up with the solutions. So that's exactly what we're saying, like, and proposing.
Yeah, awesome, James. And you know what? By the way, I'm going to give priority to anyone else who wants to talk other than me. So if you want to talk, and yes, I'm talking to you, just jump in wherever you are, because I've been talking too much here. But building off of what you're saying, James, just imagine that, Umair were to do as we're suggesting, and basically say, hey, everyone, come. We need, 1/1,000,000th of humanity to get together. Can we do that? Yes, 8,000 people will show up. Umair, if you invite us, I'll show up. And then what, is Umair going to lead us? Is Jamin Shively going to lead us? No. What if nobody leads us? Well, how might that work? Well, and by the way, we're implementing this at the press conference. See thepressconference.org, the website, thepressconference.org, where Every person who shows up gets to talk for 5 minutes. Now, if we had 8,000 people show up, we might say, hey, raise your hand. Here's just a model that could be totally leaderless, right? Now, Umair would play the role of steward by stewarding us all together into one venue, right? And then here's what could happen. Just a thought. Raise your hand if you have something you want to say, and you get 1 minute. Say what you have to say in that 1 minute, and then go to a different Zoom room. You provide the link, and anyone who wants to follow you, anyone, it could be 1,000 people, it could be no one, but anyone who wants to follow you follows you. Then the next person speaks for 1 minute and says, this is my idea. This is what I want to talk about. And whoever wants to follow you follows you. And so on and so on and so on until there's, only a dozen people left in the room. Why not? Why not? Or 100, who cares? And if there's 100 left in the room, well, we continue on that until it's down to some manageable number. I don't know, maximum 25 or something like that, right? I think 25 is the maximum number of people you can see on any one screen on a Zoom meeting, something like that. Okay. But what happened to that first person who spoke up and then 1,000 people followed? Well, continue to apply the algorithm. Now we got 1,000 people in the Zoom room. A few minutes ago, we had 8,000. Now we got 1,000 because 1,000 followed the first person who spoke. Repeat. Wash, rinse, repeat. Of those 1,000, who wants to say something that further refines what that first person said that the 1,000 people followed? And we just keep breaking it down, breaking it down, breaking it down until we have 1,000-ish rooms. Some with 2 people, some with 25, but on average, 8 people per room. Talking about what? Talking about things like these topics. And hundreds of others. And some of these will break into the hundreds. You'll probably have a bunch of people who want to talk about pandemics, for example, and solutions to pandemics, causes of pandemics, other world problems that are impacted by pandemics, like, economic collapse, for example, like totalitarianism, like, on and on and on. Okay. Anyway, that's just an example. I really think we're onto something here. I think we have, what are we doing? Are we being leaders? I don't know what we're doing. We're just talking, but we might inspire Umair to take the next step into collective intelligence. Again, I think we've had a pretty good run with collective stupidity, or a pretty bad run rather with collective stupidity. Can we at least try collective intelligence? Umair, it's in your power to, what's Chris's term? Steward us together so that we can then steward ourselves apart into 1,000 hyper-connected conversations with an average of 8 people each. What happens if 25,000 people show up instead of 8,000? That's a great problem to have. All right, Sarah, thanks. Let me check the comments here real quick. All right, Sarah. God bless you, Sarah, and come back anytime. All right. And feel free to say your last words before you go if you want, but no pressure. Never any pressure. In fact, that's one of the rules of this Zoom room. No one is ever put under pressure to talk, even in answer to a direct question. Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. All right. Be well, and best wishes for tomorrow to you and all the wonderful volunteers that you bring together, and to all the wonderful people you feed. Ending hunger and going plant-based, and bringing people together, bringing community together, undermining capitalism, one bowl of stew at a time. I'll pause for a few seconds, and if there's no other comments, I will read a response to what Chris Wilson wrote.
Well, I'll just say a quick comment there and just say that I think the block party that we have here, like, and you being the shepherd of it, or one of the original shepherds of getting this going, the block party, is a perfect example of what we're saying here and what the comment just earlier is all about as well. There are no leaders as such here, like, but it's, and there's no such. I also want to iterate as well. It's not about getting 8,000 professionals together. We're just ordinary people from all walks of life, from all over the world so far in the block party that have come together, and we've achieved some great things on different levels. And it's just a perfect example of how just ordinary people getting together can make a difference. And it's also the only way anything is going to be changed, because we all know our leaders aren't up to the job of that.
Beautiful, James. Beautiful. All right. Well, I'm going to read this comment. This is from Brian Grimshaw, responding to what Chris Wilson said. He says, I agree with much of what you say, but having successfully managed many technical teams and having been managed by both good and not so good managers, I can definitively say that leaders do not need to provide answers. Coordinating, prioritizing, keeping focus, and decision-making are all critical in providing clear direction and making a team productive and successful. But providing the answers is not necessary and can be counterproductive. Good leaders may have some of the answers some of the time, but mostly they need to listen, motivate, and make tough decisions. This requires understanding the technology, understanding the team, and what the team is trying to achieve. All this to empower and guide those with valuable knowledge and skills to contribute. We need good leaders today as much as ever. That's the end of Brian's comment. Now, I would say that Brian here is kind of blurring the lines between leaders and stewards, per Chris Wilson's point. What Brian is mentioning here, he sounds like the best examples of what he's experienced were actually stewards, not leaders. They stewarded. But I think there's a blurry line between leaders and stewards, especially since we try to put the term leader on top of anyone who's doing the role of stewardship. I don't think we really have the term steward is barely used, even when it's applicable. So I think we mistake good stewards for good leaders. Anyway, that's my comment. With that, I pass the talking feather.
No, I agree 100%. That is a complete misunderstanding there on his behalf. Like, that is stewardship. That is basically somebody who's taking the orders from above either way, and given the privilege of being called a leader, but he's basically a steward and making sure everybody's in line. Basically, he's not doing any of the thinking. It's at the end of the day, it's the team that are doing the thinking. So therefore, it's the people on the ground who are doing the thinking. Don't need the leaders. We just need to do the thinking, the talking, and then come up with the solutions. And together we can implement it as well without leaders. And so to speak.
Yeah, and the challenge that I'm putting forward, that we're putting forward to Umair in this case, is a challenge of being kind of the minimalist steward in this case, the minimum possible steward, of just saying, hey, let's come together and give this a try. 8,000 people show up, you apply an algorithm similar to the one, or maybe different from the one that I suggested. Each person talks for a minute and takes a bunch of people away from the room. It's just a way of systematically, dividing, right? But not separating, dividing 8,000 people into 1,000 different rooms to have 1,000 different conversations, recorded, transcribed, indexed, hyperconnected with cross-pollination. Go from whatever room to whatever other room you want, anytime, right? Complete freedom of movement, freedom of choice, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone becomes the captain of their own ship, so to speak. And the 8,000 people nonetheless begin to operate as a collective intelligence, borderline collective superintelligence. How many people do you need in such a process to have a collective superintelligence? Is it 8,000? Is it 800? Is it 80,000? Is it 800,000? Is it 80? I don't know. Right? How many parts are there in a Tesla truck? A super machine, right? I don't know. I would venture on the order of 20,000 or so, but I'm just guessing, right? If you consider all the electronic components, those are parts. Fine, they're, a lot of them are micro welded together into solid state, assembly. So be it. They're still parts, right? How many people participating in a collective intelligence till you cross the line to collective superintelligence? And at this point, if anyone seconds the motion, I make a motion that I read the excerpt that I sometimes read from the book Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom he's either at Oxford or Cambridge, I forget which, but Nick Bostrom.
Yeah, I'll second that.
All right, I'll read it. Let me just pause for a second while I bring up the article so people don't have to hear me go duh for a minute. Okay, we found the snippet. I'm going to screen share it here and then read through it. Here goes. The quote is called Superintelligence. Well, it's from the book Superintelligence, which the vast majority of the book is around machine intelligence, which is really interesting. But I'll just read. In his book, Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom, several different pathways to superintelligence are described and developed. The one most consistent with our Radish story, go to radish.org if you want to learn more, /white-paper if you want to read more here specifically, is the one described on page 60. And I quote, "But what of the more seemingly fanciful idea that the internet might one day wake up? Could the internet become something more than just the backbone of a loosely integrated collective superintelligence? Something more like a virtual skull housing an emerging unified superintellect. This was one of the ways that superintelligence could arise according to Werner Vinge's influential 1993 essay, which coined the term technological singularity." I think he actually did a typo here. I think what he meant to say earlier on here is, could the internet become something more than just the backbone of a loosely integrated collective intelligence? I don't think he meant to use the word superintelligence here, but that's just my guess. Nick, please join us and let's clarify. But anyway, against this, one could object that machine intelligence is hard enough to achieve through arduous engineering, and that it is incredible to suppose that it will arise spontaneously. However, the story need not be that some future version of the internet suddenly becomes super intelligent by mere happenstance. A more plausible version of the scenario would be that the internet accumulates improvements through the work of many people over many years, work to engineer better search and information filtering algorithms, more powerful data representation formats, more capable autonomous software agents, and more efficient protocols governing the interactions between such bots, and that myriad incremental improvements eventually create the basis for some more unified form of web intelligence. It seems at least conceivable that such a web-based cognitive system, super saturated with computer power and all other resources needed for explosive growth. See, that's the characteristic of collective super intelligence, is explosive growth. Save for one crucial ingredient, could, when the final missing constituent is dropped into the cauldron, blaze up with super intelligence. I really like the way he frames that, because he basically says, let's look at the borderline between not super intelligence and super intelligence. And the final thing to cross the line is one ingredient, one crucial missing ingredient. What I'm proposing is that that crucial missing ingredient could be nothing other than Umair putting out a call which brings together 8,000 people on a given Saturday to come and give this a try for a few hours. Why do I say that? They will be standing on the shoulders of the giant internet that already exists with, what did I say? Recording, transcription, indexing, right? And cross-pollination, hyperlinking, as I was talking about earlier. That's right, Umair, you, and yes, I'm talking to you, the steward, Umair, could be the single missing ingredient that gets, he talks about the internet. What I'm talking about is humanity. We've merged into one and the same at this point. You could be the crucial missing ingredient that gets humanity crossed with the internet to go super intelligent. Because again, the first day we meet, it's 8,000. Everyone talks about it. Oh my God, it was mind blowing. It was the coolest experience I've ever had. Da, da, da. They tell 10 friends. Next time it's 80,000, and then 800,000, and then 8 million. Can you imagine when 8 million minds come together into a virtual skull of around 1 million different conversations, all hyper-connected? James, if that doesn't make you do something unspeakable, my brother, I don't know what will.
I just sparked up a spliff. No, because that's what it is. Like, all we can do, man, is, the way I see it anyway, is that Umar is a vital link here. But we have to reiterate as well that we have been, we have been doing this. We're in the process of organizing the press conference. I think we should say that, and even invite Umar to the press conference and explain what the press conference is, in a sense, because there are plenty of people out there that are trying to have that are having these conversations. They have their own networks and everything. But the point that we're trying to do, and what we're trying to do, is get all these networks together on the one platform and get them cross-communicating. That's the vital message that you're getting across. And Umar has, the audience as well. And by the audience, we mean the type of people who get it, who get what Umar is talking about, and they're the type of people you want in the conversation. So, yeah, it's vital. And I think it'd be a good thing to invite Umar's listeners as well to the press conference if they wanted to.
I love it. Love it, James. Beautiful. Wow. It feels to me like we're almost there. I think sooner rather than later, Umair's going to bite. That's my prediction. And he's going to write an article saying, what the hell? Let's give it a try. We're almost dead. Let's give collective superintelligence a chance. Let's give superintelligence a chance and see if superintelligence, as we're conceiving of it here, or as Umair and readers conceive of it in some completely different way, I don't care. But let's give superintelligence a chance. It could almost be a song. All we are saying is give superintelligence a chance. It just flows. It rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, but the funny thing and the ironic thing about it is that we're here saying let's give superintelligence a chance, and the thing is that we've already had it at our fingertips all the time. We've already had it. It's being kept from us. These are what Umair's articles are about as well. I mean, people just don't realize it's being kept from us. We're capable of it, but we're just living in this system of leaders and rules, archaic rules. So, it's time that we, come to our full potential.
Sorry, heck yeah. Heck yeah. It's time to do this. What? Are we going to give collective stupidity another 10,000 years? We won't make it past even another couple years of this. It's time to give collective superintelligence a chance. See, the greater collective, again, Nick Bostrom focuses a lot on machine intelligence, web intelligence, the internet becoming intelligent. We're more focused on humanity coming together, but the reality is we need each other. The internet needs humanity, humanity needs the internet in order to make collective superintelligence a reality. It's a collective not just of humans, but of humans plus machines. Machines being the bucket, in my mind, that holds software, microelectronics, the power grid, etc.
Is there any more comments other than the one you read and the response to it? You're muted there, Jim.
Oh, I'm so sorry, James. I was on mute. So here's a comment by Mark Andrew Oglesby, which got the most applauses that I can see. Haven't finished the article yet, but I wish to correct Umair on a little something he missed. It revolves around his statement, because there's no money in it. He's referring to planting trees. There's money in chopping down trees. Planting trees is great and certainly good for the environment, but there is a better way, and it's green. Instead of going full blown for battery operated cars and whatnot, which by the way is not really ecologically sound when you examine the elements which need to be extracted from the earth to produce all those batteries, please look it up. Why not switch to biofuels, which can be easily converted to fuel internal combustion engines? A few minor adjustments to the catalytic converters already existent in our autos. Which, by the way, were fueled with biomatter to begin with. John D. Rockefeller Sr. convinced Henry Ford to switch to fossil fuels. Wonder why? Again, look it up. And what's most likely the best biofuel source on the planet? Hemp, a true cash crop if ever were one. Grows wild with little water and grows well in harsh environments while cleaning the air when growing and barely harms it when fueling the before mentioned internal combustion engine. This country of ours is ridiculously stupid, what with its continuous crusade against evil weed. But hey, folks, the uses for hemp are limitless, and the US of A needs to wise up and start mass producing this plant and its products, which, by the way, will employ a great many workers and bring in so many different sources of income, not to mention tax revenues for local, state, and federal governments. Win, win, win all around. You know, on a previous Dear Umair, I highlighted the work that I did with President Vicente Fox, largely under the banner of the company I founded, which bears the name of my great-grandfather, Diego Pellicer, who was the largest grower of hemp in the world in the Victorian era. And it was that work that inspired some criminal drug cartels to make death threats against me and to then contract diverse, I'll just drop a couple clues here, because if I don't speak the truth, when will they? Diverse criminal organizations from the Salah Network, the Sign Network, and others to make assassination attempts against me, death threats against me, physical violence against me, character assassination attempts against me. That's what happens when you stick your neck out. Perhaps the mistake I made was actually being a leader, whereas what I needed to do was be a steward. Anyway, food for thought. But it's interesting. That's the comment that got the most applauses. Chris Wilson's only got 2 applauses. The most applauded comments get many dozens of applauses, claps, likes. They appear as claps here.
Well, I gave Chris a clap here as well anyway, but unfortunately it doesn't show up on the recorded video. Just letting him know I gave him a clap anyway.
Yeah, no, I give Chris like dozens of claps. Joe Merkel writes, in response to the snippet of Umair's, history will remember them with scorn and mockery and disgrace them. The question for the rest of us is this. He writes, on point again, Umair, but you are assuming there will be future generations to write this history or read it. I have severe doubts about that. All that comment is to me is to say that we've got tremendous urgency. You know, we're almost dead. Let's give this a try, is what I keep coming back to. Leo del Toro, in response to the snippet, did you know that we could mitigate the worst effects of climate change simply by planting trees? It would take all the techno sci-fi scenarios of current day mythology, seawalls, da da da. And he writes, Leo writes, actually, by just planting pasture grass, we could suck more CO2 than trees. Just grazing pasture and have cows graze on top of them. No, let's burn everything and go to Mars. It's interesting. I think Leo's comment reflects the work of Alan Savory, who I know, which is all about regenerative, holistic regenerative grazing, which of course most vegans recoil at. But, you know, so you have this thesis antithesis of veganism versus holistic land management through grazing. You know what the synthesis of those two is? And this was put forth by Ann Mitchell. Do the grazing, just don't kill the animals. All right, it's so simple. Anyway, but see, this is what comes out of dialogue. That came out of the group Vegan Reflection that we put together, which is sort of a mashup between veganism and solar radiation management. A nice play on words there as well. DRB Rhett writes, if you follow the news, you find that the COVID debacle and perhaps others were caused by man's arrogant experimentation with these pathogens. People like Gates, Fauci, and others in power desiring to plan out the future for humanity. Did you know you can patent a virus? Did you know that cheaper and effective drug treatments for COVID are lied about and censored because the patents have expired and there is no money to be had, as opposed to newer treatments where the patents are in force? And if effective treatments were available for COVID, then the vaccinations would technically lose their emergency status. DRB Rhett, who wrote a comment that I read a minute ago, writes, unfortunately, planting trees does not stop forest fires. What do you think the fuel is for forest fires? Trees. Planting trees and other ground cover after a forest fire helps prevent flooding and landslides. People who have money tend to want to make more and also implement their will onto the rest of the world. They are the doers. Unfortunately, many of their ideas are not necessarily good for the country, but rather an indulgence of their fantasies. It is not necessary to destroy the economy while moving towards cleaner energy. We could easily produce enough oil to become independent from foreign sources while we are moving towards cleaner energy. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. There are many forms of alternative energy that have been found to have problems such as their inability to produce enough energy, environmental problems, production problems, such as the use of large amounts of unclean energy to produce them. Right now, it should be starting to become clear that more lies and fascism that actually affect your lives is coming from the left, and especially from those that stand to profit from them by asserting power and control through mandates and punishment. Medical fascism is where it starts. Anyway, I'm going to stop reading there just because I feel like it. Let's see. Najib writes, if it's us versus them, then know that we are the ones putting them in their positions. And in countries like mine, Pakistan, the leaders consider it their birthright to rule over masses. And it's the charade of same faces taking turns. It's going to be a long process, but if we, the masses, decide to take action, then the first step would be to start talking to each other across borders. Hallelujah. That's Najib. That's collective intelligence.
Exactly.
That's what I'm talking about. How many claps did Najib get? 0. Well, Najib, you've got claps. You've got claps from us, bro.
Exactly. That's just typical. And how many claps did the other moron before that get then? Sorry, no for calling him that, but what he
Oh,
was
no,
saying.
no, no. He didn't get any claps, but he did get, what did he get? Nothing. No claps, no replies. Oh, actually, he did get a reply. Sorry. The reply goes, dead trees, which die because of the bark beetle, are a major fuel that feeds a wildfire. Once attacked by bark beetles, the tree will die. More than 102 million trees, mostly conifers, have already died from drought and bark beetles in California. In some communities, up to 85% of the forest trees have been killed, becoming dry fuel, just waiting to go up in flames. Apparently, that's a quote from CAL FIRE. The bark beetle proliferates because of stressed and thirsty trees. The trees are stressed and thirsty because of drought, which is caused by climate change. The beetle penetrates the bark of a parched tree, lays its eggs, and boom, the tree dies, which causes most of the surrounding trees to die as well. Green, hydrated, healthy trees are not the problem. So yes, let's all plant more trees. And then B. Rhett replies to her comment. Remember, he was the guy who wrote the long comment that I only read part of. And his reply is, trees, especially pine trees, are the ones you are talking about. Although dead trees due to pine beetle is a factor, it is irrelevant as even live trees coat the forest floor with pine needles year after year, forming a layer of dried fuel. Most fires are caused by man, not due to climate change. That sounds like a...
I was right in calling him a moron.
Clearing areas of the forest actually helps prevent fires from spreading. Fires are part of the natural cycle in the forest and replenish soil nutrients. And of course, there are many more reasons that trees die other than beetle kill. Extremely cold winters will kill the beetles. We haven't had many of these lately. Here's some clarity on climate change, and he provides an article that he wrote with a link to it. I'm almost tempted to click on it, but it's your call, James.
Not from what he was just after saying there. I know he doesn't believe in it, obviously.
Yeah. The thing is, here's the point I want to make. I mean, just because we bring together 8,000 people into a process doesn't mean that all 8,000 people are going to have either correct information to convey, brilliant insights, wisdom, or relevant experience, or anything of the sort. But okay, so how do you get I once proposed that we do something like collective intelligence at Microsoft, and Steve Ballmer's comment, he presided over the company during the last decade. His response to me was, I think that could result in a lot of cacophonous activity. And it's basically smart to do what we do. Well, we did what we did for a whole decade, and the stock price was flat, right? Until Satya Nadella took over. But anyway, and I've got stories to tell about Satya. I love Satya, and he's also deeply misguided on a bunch of things. But you see, again, it's collective intelligence. No one person can figure this out. Satya's doing a great job. Love you, Satya. But what was my point? My point was, what we need is not just, here's my point. It's very simple. Bring the 8,000 people together, break out into 1,000 different rooms, have a bunch of cacophonous activity. Thank you, Steve Ballmer. And the best ideas will bubble to the top. It's kind of as inevitable as gravity. The best ideas will bubble to the top. Remember the example I talked about with Sarah Siegel earlier, who was on earlier? People will be like, what? Sarah's here? People will gravitate towards her, go into breakout rooms to help solve her problems, right? It's kind of analogous to what happened with John F. Kennedy. He said, hey, let's put a man on the moon, right? As patriarchal and misogynist as that statement is. Not a person on the moon, mind you, a man on the moon. And what happened? NASA was formed. A bunch of teams, a bunch of groups got together within NASA and outside of NASA. And next thing you know, Neil Armstrong was taking steps on the moon.
Exactly.
John F. Kennedy was a steward. He was murdered for being a steward, right? Just like,
Gandhi was a steward.
And he got murdered. I've got death threats hanging over my head to this day, which have not been retracted despite substantial efforts on my part, which actually I believe have kept me alive. They also tried to kill my dad. They were unsuccessful. But, being an effective steward can put a death mark on you. It's just part of reality. But you know what? We're all about to die anyway, which is partly what makes me so fearless, right?
This is it. We are all about it. Well, we don't get our shit together anyway, that's for sure. And this, yeah, I don't. It's frustrating, really is like frustrating.
But you know what? Here's the thing, James. You and I have been working at this for a year and a half now. Over a year and a half. Over a year and a half. We've been working together. You and I and a bunch of other committed folks. I feel like just in this last meeting today, over the course of the last, 3 hours or so, we've really made some great strides. I think we've got Nick Bostrom's missing crucial ingredient to drop into the cauldron. It's Umair putting out a bold invitation saying, can 1 in a million of us get together? In other words, 8,000, can 8,000 people come together and give collective intelligence a chance to emerge and evolve towards collective super intelligence? Because 8,000 will beget 80,000, will beget 800,000, will beget 8 million.
Yeah, no doubt about it. If he put out the clarion call like that there would be plenty of volunteers that would jump to it. This is my point. Like, we just need to get people, aware of what's necessary. First to get them into the conversation, and get the rest of the people aware. Then, you know what I mean. So awareness is the key. So, no doubt about it. If Umair put out, if he wrote an article about what we're proposing here, there'd be plenty of people jump on board.
All you'd have to do is write an article about it, put a link to this recording, and say, hey, what do y'all think? If you're interested, come join us. We're meeting on whatever date at whatever time, right? Could even be at the press conference itself. Please overwhelm the press conference with people. We're meeting on September 23rd, but that's just one proposal of a date. Umair, it's up to you. You call it, bro. Call the ball. Call it.
I mean, I feel like some of the articles we've read there in the last week or two, they're like, I feel already like that. I mean, it's obvious. Like, that's why we kind of drawn to him. He's talking our fucking language. Like, you know what I mean? So this is why we're drawn to him as well. So we just have to make a connection.
I got to pause for a quick second. 1 sec. Pausing.
No.
Record. All right. After a quick pause. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up for the evening. It's 9:20 p.m. here, which means it's 4:20 somewhere, and it's 5:20 in the morning in Cork, Ireland. Umair, James has stayed up all night for you. That's how much he loves you. That's how much we love you, Umair. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you all. James, you have the last words.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Yeah, definitely. I stayed up for this because dear Umair is becoming a good part of our week, along with a lot of other activities such as food healers and the SRM projects and everything else. So we just need to get everybody on board and get them into the conversation. And I just urge Umair again to, put out the clarion call. And again, as I'll always say and finish off each week, it'll be great to have you here with us sometime. So that's for me. Take care.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, James. Thank you, Alan, Sarah, Alchemy, everyone who's been on this wonderful segment of Dear Umair. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Everyone's welcome. Everyone is welcome on Dear Umair. Just click on the link and we'll see you here. Thanks again, James. Thanks a million. Love you. Love you all. We love you, Dear Umair. We love your amazing audience. Chris Wilson, all the great comments. And we'll see you next time. Much love, everyone. Have a great sleep, James. We'll see you soon.
Well, I'd say good night and God bless to all of you, and slán a what.